Hi, I'm Ann Delisi.
And I'm Chef James Rigato.
And on this episode of Essential Cooking, we talk with Detroit chef and social media star John Kung about his new book titled Chinese American Recipes from a Third Culture Kitchen. We also talked about how he decided which recipes would make it into the book and what it's like to finally meet all of these people who follow him on social media. So here's our conversation with John Kung. Well, John, it's great to have you back. James and I were kind of keeping track of you, knowing that you were working on this cookbook, and that we wanted to have you on. And I just can't even imagine writing a cookbook and what goes into it. But I wanted you to talk about why you decided it was time.
It's so interesting because, like, the last time we spoke, did I just start or had I started already?
I think you were talking about it.
I was talking about it.
You were
okay.
talking about
and
it.
I think within that year, I wrote it. So for me, writing a cookbook was a 2-year process where I spent an entire year writing it, and then we spent a year shooting it, producing it, designing it, everything that is involved with after you write it. And so I think the time when I wrote it was like 2 years ago. It's a really interesting like cross section of time of where I was and where my like head was in the space of everything. And it was such a tumultuous time as well. Right. It was like just post-pandemic. So yeah, it came out of like just a desire to translate what I had been doing on TikTok into a book, and because of TikTok, the opportunity came. Mm-hmm. That's where that came from.
Was it harder than you thought?
Yes, but not in the way that I thought it would be hard.
So how did you think it would be hard?
So I had very romantic ideas of like what writing a book was. I pictured like being locked in a cabin, like somewhere. Like ideally, it would have been like Maine, or something. But like just in the dark, just writing this book. But like while I was writing the cookbook, I was also ascending into a TikTok career, as well as starting a YouTube channel and learning how to film, learning how to write for that. And so doing all three at once, the writing portion of the book kind of just passed in a blur. And I feel like I was robbed of the experience of writing it. So I'm kind of I'm excited now that everything's a little more established to like get into writing another one. But yeah, everything that happened after the fact, like producing a cookbook and kind of organizing all of the different hands that are involved in making it, like that was something that I had no expectation of and just had no idea that was going to happen. So that part was the more difficult part for sure.
How did you decide what was going to go in there? You cooked a million things. So how did you decide, well, these are the things that I want to share with people? And it's certainly an extension of yourself and a story to tell, I would imagine, as well. So how did you determine what was going to make it into this cookbook?
Interestingly enough, like I kind of constructed the cookbook itself as if it were a menu of sorts. And so like having things that made sense with each other within like the chapters or within like the actual expanse of the book itself. It's kind of just like the head space that I was in when I constructed it. But also a lot of it had to do with my ideas on third culture food, cross-cultural cooking. And so the way that I formatted it and the way a lot of cookbooks are structured is we're like pantry section in the front. And then you start with like sauces and like your basics and stuff. But I wanted to make sure that I would arm my readers with a solid foundation of Chinese, knowledge in Chinese ingredients, but also in like the basic sauces, such as like ginger scallion oil, chili oils, a lot of like the preserves and pickles and stuff, so that with the intention that they actually would go and run with it and kind of incorporate it into their own food. And the latter chapter of the book kind of serves as an example of how they can incorporate those like basic recipes in the first chapter into different cross-cultural cuisines. So from like the chili oil, we would get dan dan lasagna, or you would have like lion's head meatball in broth recipe, which is very Cantonese focused, but then we're going to switch and put it into like a big bowl of spaghetti. There is a clay pot jollof rice recipe. Like it's just, they are recipes that I'm very, very proud of, but I like to think of that as more examples of where people can take their own cooking and how you can actually incorporate this, what was normally just reserved for kind of like restaurants and anything from like semi-fine dining and above, like that creativity, something that people can do at home and pretty easily, because when you're starting with sauces, you're just putting it on stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of home cooks are missing the pantry.
Yeah.
Or just like, layering your refrigerator to have things like chili oil or ginger scallion oil, like you said, or chili crisp. I mean, just think toppings, layerings, just basic flavoring agents. Because I think when people get into preparing for the week or meal prep, they start to panic when it's like, oh, I only know 3 dishes, or I only know 4 things.
Right.
I'm sick of eating my own food. I think that your pantry section and the breaking down of spices is really beneficial. I know most books do it, but I thought yours was really beneficial because you talk about it. Obviously, it's a Chinese American titled book, but I think that it's very open to just here's big flavors and here's how they work. Feel free to combine them at will.
Yeah, and I think like people oftentimes like glance over the pantry section and like these recipes where they teach you how to make the oils and the sauces and stuff. But those are generally usually the ones that A, last the longest in your fridge. Some of them like can last for like a month in your fridge. But B, those are like the things that you can potentially use all the time.
Right.
Like you're not supposed to just put the chili oil on the noodles. You can also put it on your pizza, and you can also put it on scrambled eggs, fried chicken, mac and cheese. Like all of these things taste really, really good with a little bit of spice. And my chili oil is actually formulated without any salt whatsoever. So it's all just aroma and spice. And that way it never makes the things that you put it on too salty. You can always add salt afterwards, but it will never oversalt a pizza, for example, which is already really salty.
So, John, let's talk about the title of the book. Chinese American Recipes from a Third Culture Kitchen. Can you explain what that means?
So we added that in because Kung Food was too vague.
So the original title was Kung Food.
The original title was actually the original title that I wanted for it was ABC, which was American Born Chinese. Unfortunately, that became an award winning graphic novel. Well, not unfortunately for the writer, but it became an award-winning graphic novel, which became a Disney series with Michelle Yeoh and I just remember Michelle. I never saw the show, but Michelle Yeoh was in it. And so I was like, well, I'm not competing with that.
Disney will own your book very quickly.
Exactly. It's like I'm not trying to piss off the mouse in my first cookbook. So actually, Kung Food was the name of my pop-up, the name of my kitchen here in Eastern Market. Like, it was something that I was very, very happy to put on the title of my first book. But obviously, Kung Food only has really meaning to me and possibly some of the people that have eaten at my place here in Detroit, not really so much within the rest of the world. So the publisher asked me to like figure out some, what is it, like a subtitle? I think they call it a subtitle. That kind of illustrates more of what is inside the book. And so we had decided on, after many options, whatever it says on there.
Chinese American recipes
from a third culture kitchen. Thank you. Thank you. I've been calling it Kung Food.
You're going to stick to it.
Yeah.
So what is a third culture kitchen?
So in terms of like who a third culture person is, third culture refers to somebody who has had essentially full immersion on multiple cultures through their lived experience. So, for example, I grew up in a very traditional Chinese household. And when we were in Canada, every time I would step out of my house, I would cross what I would call a little cultural threshold every single time between what my home was like and what my life outside of the home, like school was like. And that immersion gives you so much access to like nuances of culture and what the way people understand it, whether it be humor, whether it be art, whether it be food, all of that everyday experience in doing both things. And I believe that informs people when they have a creative output on their style. And so being a third culture kitchen, like living in a third culture kitchen, it means to me like I have access of everything that I understood to be good, everything that I loved being in Canada, the United States, but also coming from a Chinese household where even though I can't read Chinese, I recognize every label and every bottle of every like ingredient that I grew up with, mostly because none of these companies ever did a brand refresh since the 80s. So all the labels for all of these things look the exact same. So when I was tracing back into like teaching myself how to cook Chinese food, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this on the shelf. And so I would buy it and I would taste it and I was like, oh my gosh, this goes on this goes on congee, this goes on rice, this goes on our eggs. And using that and then melding it with things that I learned to love when I'm here, such as like lasagna, spaghetti, chicken, and waffles, all of that stuff. And combining the two, I think that nuance just gives us access to creating something that is recognizable to people on both sides of that cultural threshold as something familiar, even though it's not exactly what they know.
We'll be right back, right after this.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
You said in your last comment that you were teaching yourself how to cook Chinese food.
Yes.
And that got my attention because I kept thinking, oh, you would have learned how to cook Chinese food when you were growing up at home.
No. Interestingly enough, I ate very good Chinese food living in Hong Kong, but, we don't really have the biggest kitchens and stuff over there. Mm-hmm. So, I had basic home cooking, but my experiences with what good Chinese food was usually came from eating out or like going to family dinners and whatnot. And nobody really taught me how to cook. So I was stumbling my way through teaching myself how to cook while I was here in Detroit in like 2007, 2008, because I missed that food. And the only way that I could get it was if I was making it for myself.
And did you expect to have... I guess, at that time, 2007, a social media career didn't really exist then.
No.
What did you expect to do with your cooking at the time? I mean, how fast did you turn into pop-ups and feeding people?
Oh.
And then obviously, because that quickly turned into taking it, digital and social.
Yeah.
And then now, it's probably, which is wild that we live in this world, but most of the people experiencing your food is not through eating it.
Is not through eating it anymore, which is crazy.
So I guess walk me through, like, you start cooking to nourish a part of yourself that, that you have no one else to do so. But then how do you get to today?
It all really started with me documenting my own explorations through teaching myself how to cook with a blog. And it was just like I was just like recording what I was finding and like trying to learn and looking for ingredients. Everything from that on was just me trying to have like some kind of creative outlet at the time that was involving learning how to cook Chinese food. That got the attention of some like really, really early pop-ups who asked me to help them with theirs. And it turned into making a pop-up for myself. Actually, where I live now in West Village, there's like a house on Agnes Street where I had my very, very first pop-up inside that house because it was in the middle of construction. There were no walls. It was just down to the studs. And I actually did like barbecue saute inside there. It was a Halloween, I think. And Halloween, probably like 2009 2009, 2010. And then that got the attention of Angela at Coffee And, if you remember like that from back in the day. And I was started doing pop-ups out of there. And it was like such an organic step-by-step, almost quintessentially Detroit story of like how these things and connections are made.
Totally.
Because
especially at that time.
Oh, for sure.
There's like so many things were trucks and pop-ups
Yeah.
that became now what we know them as like, brick and mortars.
Brick and mortars, yeah. It all came from, so many of us came from that place. And like the community was like a handful of people. We were so small.
That's when social media was basically in person.
It was literally in person. It is crazy to think that we're now talking about a time where we are without a technology that we use all the time. But I never had any like desire to be like a social media influencer or even a content creator. Like I'm an elder millennial. My value who grew up during a recession, like my values was always in something that was tangible,
Yeah,
something that I
definitely.
can hold. That's where my security was.
Which is why you made a book.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a really good point.
You know,
Oh my God.
I mean, but really, because when did things turn the corner to like now you don't have time for your pop-ups because you're making so much content?
Right.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what year do you think is that? Like, is that COVID?
That was COVID. It all started because like I felt like the only way that I could reach people through my food now that I had shut down my kitchen
Yeah, was
because
to
of the
go-
pandemic
to
was
go online.
it all happened because of COVID. Like if it wasn't for COVID, I would probably have opened my brick and mortar by
Yeah,
now.
no kidding, right?
Yeah.
So that makes that's the kind of what I'm searching for is because you pivot to making content. The content blows up,
Yeah.
wonderfully, and now you're making a book because I think you're probably trying to dance in both worlds where you
Yeah.
obviously want to make content, but you still want to give somebody something that they can touch and hold. Do you see yourself physically cooking for the customer directly in the future in any way?
Will I be going back into
And
service?
not necessarily brick and mortar, but like
Yeah, but like-
do you do a pop-up food tour with this book? Do you do in-person classes?
You know what's crazy? There are actually a couple of pop-ups that are involved with the tour of this book, but this is the first time I've ever been like involved in the pop-up thing, and I'm not actually cooking the food. Because I'm traveling and the tour is like literally I'm 24 hours in this city, 24 hours in that city. Obviously, I have no time to prep and stuff.
Is
so I'm
someone
like,
making your recipes?
They're literally
Okay,
doing
that's
that.
pretty
They
cool.
have my recipes and they're going off and running with it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, James, you're still cooking. You have a brick and mortar location, Mabel Gray.
I do.
You get to cook.
I'm not famous on TikTok.
No.
I mean,
I don't
you
even
were
have
on
a
TV.
TikTok.
You were on TV though.
Oh,
like
yeah,
you were
yeah,
like
I mean,
you were the
Yeah, come on. Please. TV's like ancient. TikTok. I mean, that's like real time. I mean, right now, yeah, right. You could probably you could like put a hit on me, and I'd be dead this afternoon on TikTok.
You still have the experience of cooking for people and seeing their reaction to your food. John, do you miss that part of it, of actually cooking for people, serving your food, and watching them consume what you made?
You know what? I do, because I think the reason why I got into cooking at all was because, that house on Agnes where I did my first pop-up, I did this butternut squash curry soup made with coconut milk, which was, pretty exciting for me to make in like 2009. And I so very distinctly remembering watching these two ladies eat that soup and then look at each other just like wide-eyed. And I could read their lips and like, oh my God, this is so effing good. And after that, I mean, like, that was something that I chased
You still
the
are.
entire
Yeah,
time.
I think all
Yeah.
chefs do that. I mean, really, at the end of the day, you just want to. That's like a visceral gratification that
Right.
nothing else does. I mean, likes, clicks, follows. It doesn't equate to somebody eating your food and being like, this is gonna stay with me. I'm gonna remember this.
And we are so creepy when we watch people. We're just waiting for that reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm just like, you're like trying to put something in between you and the person that
Yeah.
you're watching. You're just like looking at their reaction, but you're really just like staring at them from behind, like
Oh,
some
yeah.
olive oil or
I'm
something.
like the Phantom of the Opera. I'm just like
exactly.
watching from the rafters.
But no, I mean, like, there is a version of that I have where people do make the food, not necessarily serve, but I've got recipes all over the place where they will do something and then they'll tag me on it,
And
and
you
then
can see them
and
eating
you can
it?
see.
That's
Well, they
cool.
won't really show them eating, but I'll see what they made, and they'll tag me, and they'll be like, "Hey, this is like
Right.
your thing." Like I was on a tomato sandwich kick this summer.
I saw
that.
You're an animal. The crunch, the crunch sounds.
every day. Like, you know, actually the trick to get the crunch is it's never as dry as it sounds.
It sounds dry.
It
I
sounds
was saying,
very
like,
dry.
Bro, how are your gums?
It sounds
I thought
very
you were
dry.
ripping up the roof of your mouth.
I will say, but that's because like inside like a sleeve or hidden somewhere else is like a dedicated microphone.
Sneaky devil.
Because like it's like the way that something sounds, like obviously to us who eat, like who cook food and stuff, it does sound dry, and it's like it kind of has to, because you don't the ones that don't have that crunch don't have those crazy views, because the crunch is just something that like grabs your attention,
Oh, yeah.
whether you want to eat it or not.
Right.
So it is a little bit of, I don't know if it's trickery.
It's TV magic.
It is a little bit of TV magic, but at the same time, it's like it's very real, but it's just maybe a little bit hyper real. It's like when you kind of like oversaturate the photos of the food
right.
that you take.
Got
I was
it.
like, it is that. Those are colors that exist.
Yeah,
Just maybe just a little more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
spruced up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So now you're out there talking about your book. That's happening now too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And now you're like doing a whole different experience, going out and talking about your book and your recipes. How is this going so far?
Well, the tour hasn't started yet, and I think it's like right in the kind of the beginning. Actually, I leave next week for it as of like filming or recording this. But I'm very excited. I am very nervous. I'm terrified that nobody's going to show up.
That's
the least of
that
your
won't
problems.
happen.
and that's the thing though, right? So like I create and operate in just a vacuum of almost complete like isolation. Like I don't see anybody, and it's really hard to quantify those numbers that you see, like, you know, those comments, those numbers and
Right.
stuff like that. And for your mental health, it's probably better like not to think about it too much. But at the same time, like I can't see every single face behind the comment or something like that.
Because what? I mean, how many followers do you have on TikTok right now?
On TikTok is 1.7 million.
And so, like, what cities are you going to?
I am going to New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago before coming home.
And where are you doing the book? Are you going to bookstores?
I'm going to bookstores, I'm going to restaurants and stuff like that. And like, actually, I will say, to like my credit, we sold out one location within like a couple days.
All right, there you
It
go.
was the Chinese American Museum in Chinatown in New York. And so that is very encouraging.
That's badass.
But thank you. But I still like, because I've never seen this, I've never seen a crowd of people show up for the sake of like listening to me talk. Like I still can't picture it. Like the start of my career up to this point, this high point, still only involved maybe like a handful of people that I've met in person. A lot of the people that like do my management and stuff like that, I've only met them online. Like
Wow.
it's insane. Like, and because of that, it's hard for me to picture like me filling a room for that reason.
It's going to happen.
I agree.
And it's going to be exciting for you to actually have FaceTime, literally, with these people
I'm
who
so excited
are
for
fans
that.
of yours.
Yeah.
And be able to talk with them, because you're kind of living in a vacuum right now. And that's going to change. And that's going to be pretty exciting.
Definitely.
Congratulations on the book, John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for visiting with us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And where can I get the book?
Oh yeah, the book is out. You can look and ask. You could always ask your local independent bookstore to carry it if they don't already. But otherwise, you can find me on all of the usual online channels: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those 2-day shipping places.
And how can we follow you on social?
And it's just at John Kung on pretty much everywhere. JONKUNG.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Essential Cooking. If you've been enjoying our show, please drop us a review and share it with a friend. This podcast is produced by me, Ann Delisi, with my co-host, James Rigato. This episode was also produced, engineered, and edited by Connor Anderson, with production support from David Lyons, original music by the Mallet Brothers. Essential Cooking is a production of WDET, Detroit's NPR station.